In the great sweep of human history, the facts will always win. At some point in the dim and distant past, even people currently living under the jackboot of North Korean administrations or Vladimir Putin's Russia, the truth will eventually out. It has to. Facts have to prevail. And then, of course, the process of chipping away at them and the rise of totalitarian regimes, people with dictatorial ambitions begin to chip away at facts and truth, as Americans are discovering at the moment. But they do have to come out on top, which is why I wonder how we should approach people who are still in denial of the facts, who still think there was a brilliant Brexit, but it goes to a different school, or it could have all been so wonderful, we've been betrayed, or unicorns do exist, that we just haven't found one yet. What's the correct approach there? Does it even matter? Because if you're dealing with members of a cult, there's not a great deal you can do to break the spell of the cult. Richard is in Kenton in Middlesex. Richard, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello, mate.
First time I've spoken to you. I've seen you quite a bit on YouTube.
Welcome.
And fascinated with your comments. I was in favour of Brexit. I voted for Brexit, but it hasn't worked. The previous government, it didn't work, and this government, it hadn't worked because the politicians are, in a word, hopeless, all of them.
What would you have done?
That's why the Reform Party is going to get a lot of votes in all the future elections.
What would you have done?
What would I have done?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not a politician. That's not my expertise.
No, but if you don't have a view on that...
I would certainly have sealed the borders up.
Sealed the borders up?
Yes.
Okay.
I think zero we've got how many people in this country? 75, 80 million unofficially. Well over 70 million.
Unofficially?
When I was growing up, there was 50 million.
Right.
How can this small area, this tiny country, accommodate 20 million more people?
Yeah.
It's crazy. It cannot work. And also from overpopulation, you can't get a doctor's appointment. You can't park your car.
Well, that's
you can't
largely
drive into London.
That's large. Well, I'm in London. I came in on a bus this morning. You're in Kenton.
I go on buses. I'm a senior citizen.
You're in Kenton. So your theory is we just need to do all of the same things again, but harder.
The same things meaning what?
Trusting Nigel Farage, most obviously.
Well, we'll give him a try.
Yeah, because the last promises he made have gone so well, haven't they?
I wouldn't know what they were exactly.
He told you Brexit was going to do loads of magical things, and it's done precisely none of them. And some of us explained why it would be impossible to deliver all of the things that he promised, and we've been proved right. But you still trust him?
I don't trust him.
Yes, you do.
I'll give them a chance because
that involves
the other
trust.
Major parties have got any chance of winning an election.
And apart from somehow
90% of the country would say they're hopeless.
And apart from somehow sealing our borders, when I ask you what you could or what any politician could have done differently, you've got nothing.
I haven't got nothing. I'm not an expert on how I would seal the borders.
No, but let's forget about sealing the borders and talk about how Brexit could have gone better.
Sealing the borders is not the right words.
Well, I think they were yours.
They were my words.
Okay.
They weren't the right words.
That's okay. That's a very Brexity thing to do. What other things could have made Brexit better?
By keeping the population down.
How would we do that? Sterilisation?
No.
Contraception?
The immigration.
Right. Apart from immigration...
The birth rate is falling. British people are having fewer children.
Therefore, we need immigration. But we're abolishing immigration. So apart from immigration, how could Brexit have gone better?
Apart from immigration?
Yeah.
By having control of your own country, which I wouldn't know whether we have or not, and not being ruled by Europe.
In what way? Give me an example of that, would you?
I can't give you an example.
Does that not embarrass you on any level? You're on the national radio now, convinced that you've got some interesting points to make, and when the presenter asks you politely, calmly, for just like one single intelligent insight into the position that you hold, you just say, "Oh, I can't. I've got nothing. I'm not a politician. I don't know."
I'm slightly embarrassed because I'm not an expert. I'm
Do you know who else isn't an expert on this?
You.
No, I am. Ask me anything. Every single person who's encouraged you to support Brexit, there's not a single expert among them, and yet you're still trusting them instead of the people who have been proved right about everything. And I hear the chuckle, and that means that you're not someone who's been desperately affected by Brexit. You're not someone whose business has been shut down. You're someone who lies awake in bed in Middlesex having weird dreams about immigrants. You're not someone who's had...
You're very rude to me, aren't you?
Well, I am very rude to you, yes, because of what you've done to my country.
What I've done.
And now you're here to tell me you've got no clue about anything.
What have I done? I voted for Brexit. It was 51% against 49%.
You voted for Brexit and you still cling to the carcass that it could somehow have gone well. And apart from making life difficult for people who don't look like you haven't got a single clue what that means, what you want, or how you'd go about getting it. So how on earth, Richard, could I not be rude to you?
Well, a lot of people are rude to me because I've got very strong views on certain things.
No, it's not because you've got very strong views, Richard. It's because you can't explain a single one of them.
Because I told you 3 times I'm not an expert on politics.
So you're literally sitting in front of me now saying I've got very strong views on things, but I don't understand any of them.
Which 90% of the population would have. All the people who
I can
vote.
promise you, Richard, that 90% of the population do not have very strong views about things that they can't explain. And if they did, they wouldn't be stupid enough to ring up a radio station and advertise it.
I just wanted to speak to you. I wanted to see how many times you'd interrupt me. But I have got strong views.
But you don't understand why?
Yes, I do.
Because you're not an expert. In fact, you are Mr. Brexit. I've got really strong views. I hate immigration, and I have absolutely no insights whatsoever into all of the reasons behind the strong views that I hold.
I don't hate immigration. If we had a population of 50 million, I would encourage immigration. Well, you have to. America is how many times as big as Britain? 30, 40 times as big in area. They've got 6 times as many people. They've got 300 and something million.
It's 10:45.
Yeah, I'm going to play you one that a lot of you have pointed out to me. I don't know how to talk about this, and there are 2 reasons for this. One is it's beyond hideous. The second is I saw one of Trump's idiot children describing it as brilliant. And you worry, don't you, particularly when Idiot's Corner is open, and for the avoidance of doubt, it's shut today because nobody's got anything interesting to say. It's just insults and abuse of me, which I'll enjoy reading, but I don't think it would be fair to inflict it on you. But you just wonder whether this will curry favour or support or admiration from the kind of boneheaded people who are still cheering on Donald Trump. And, because it is all linked, albeit sometimes somewhat obliquely, they're still cheering on Donald Trump and Boris Johnson and Brexit and austerity and probably Liz Truss and all the rest of it. But this is a moment that historians of the future will struggle to believe, because the person in the room sitting next to Donald Trump in front of the world's television cameras is the Prime Minister of Japan.
Why didn't you tell U.S. allies in Europe and Asia, like Japan, about the war before attacking Iran? So we are very confused about we Japanese citizens.
Well, one thing, you don't want to signal too much. You know, when we go in, we went in very hard, and we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay? Right? You know, he's asking me, no, you believe in surprise, I think, much more so than us.
What is the word you'd use? Verbal incontinence? Absolutely no control over his mouth. And that's the second time this week. What was the first time? Can we remember? There was another moment in the Oval Office where he said something and the sycophants couldn't quite cover up their shock and disgust quickly enough. I think these are moments where you realise that the Emperor's court know that he's naked. Is it Hans Christian Andersen, the Emperor's New Clothes? But the bit that you miss when you're a kid reading it is that they all knew he was... Well, you don't miss that bit, but the boy is the hero of the story. The boy in the crowd, it's a living, shouting, he's naked, but everybody knows he's naked. They just have to pretend. That whether or not they believe that only clever people can see the clothes, so they're all pretending they can see the clothes because they're terrified that the world will think they're not clever, or whether they know it's all a load of hokum, but because the Emperor believes it, they have to go along with it. And these moments, and it's only twice that it's happened now, to my knowledge, although if you've got other examples, it would be nice to put together a compendium for next week. These moments where even the most carefully curated and choreographed room full of sycophants, full of fraudulent sycophants, even there, sometimes he is so hideously crass that they just need a moment to collect themselves before they can start pretending that he's not hideously crass. So we'll listen first again to what happened yesterday with the Prime Minister of Japan in the room. And you can hear, I think you can hear, and remember that the room will be full of sycophants, but there will also be members of the Japanese party there as well, not to mention the Japanese Prime Minister looking at Donald Trump with a face that is almost beyond description. I mean, by which I mean she can't quite believe what she's seeing and hearing. So here comes that. And then we'll remind ourselves of what happened when he started attacking Gavin Newsom by calling him Gavin Newscum, which is hilarious, and mocking him for having dyslexia while also somehow christening him the President of the United States of America. So listen, what I want you to listen for is the reaction of the room, because I find it very interesting. So this is yesterday.
Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay? Right? You know, he's asking me, no, you believe in surprise, I think, much more so than us.
And of course, it was disgusting what he said about Gavin Newsom, but it wasn't that clip that I was thinking of. It was this one where he... well, what does he do? I mean, he forces or compels his colleague to reveal that somebody has received a terminal diagnosis. I mean, just listen to this, but crucially, once again, listen to the room.
Congressman Dunn is a real champion and a patriot because he's still coming to work, and if others got this diagnosis, they would be apt to go home and retire. And
what was the diagnosis?
It was, I think it was a terminal diagnosis.
He would be dead by June.
Okay, that wasn't public, but yeah, okay, that's it was grim. That's what I was going to say.
Listen again to that, because the room. That's when you know what, I talk a lot about mirrors. You hold up a mirror, and a lot of people will be very cross with the person holding up the mirror because of what they see in it. And these moments speak to that phenomenon for me, because almost everybody in that room is a sycophant and a cheerleader for Donald Trump, and yet there are moments where even they can't avoid the evidence of their eyes and ears.
I think it was a terminal diagnosis.
He would be dead by June.
Okay, that wasn't public, but yeah, okay, that's it was grim. That's what I was going to say.
And of course, the whole point of that exchange was to allow Donald Trump to boast about how loyal Neil Dunn, the dying congressman, is, by revealing that he was. Well, you heard it. I don't need to tell you how disgusting that was, or how disgusting the comments about Pearl Harbor were. But what's interesting is the fact that when you sit here thinking, do people go along with it? Do they like it? Do they? And then every now and then there's a little chink in the armour of their sycophancy because the light gets through, and they can't avoid, in those moments that pass ever so quickly, they can't avoid the horror of what they have become. It's not enough to say what Trump has turned them into, because it's a choice. They can't in those moments avoid the absolute horror of what he is, but even more crucially, of course, what they have become. We're going to call it the Farage 5 million. We are looking for 5 million stories involving newly elected Reform or of course, already elected Reform politicians to collate together before the next general election. But I wasn't expecting aliens to make an appearance quite so early.
No, very interesting, James. We'll get to that in a bit. I know you're excited about hearing about this. We'll get to that in a sec. But to sort of lay the land out for you, this was a council meeting, an extraordinary meeting called in yesterday around the borrowing of £57 million worth of money towards the reopening of Doncaster Sheffield Airport. So that closed in 2022. The previous owners, Peel Group, said it was no longer financially viable. There's been a massive campaign to get it back open locally. Local Labour politicians backing it. We've had Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Doncaster to back it as well. So the Reform Group, who are the largest party on the council, but the Labour mayor has the executive power, they say there was new information that came to light around this 125-year lease signed by the council, including an annual £5 million base rate loan to the owners of the land, Peel Group. They wanted an extraordinary meeting on it to discuss what they called rescinding the money. There's about a 2-hour council meeting yesterday, and after all that, the Reform Group decided to continue with the funding as planned, which they had already approved, by the way, in November.
What happened to all the important new information that they'd discovered then?
They say that there was this new information that came to light in January, what the Labour Mayor Ros Jones told me was this information was already there, was discussed in council meetings, but that the Reform councillors hadn't always turned up to those meetings or read the detail around it. So I managed to chat to the deputy leader of the Reform Doncaster group. This is Jason Charity. And I asked him essentially whether, have you turned on this?
People see the word rescind and the future of the airport. Surely as Reform, you want the airport open.
We do. 100% we want the airport open. Richard Tice, Reform's deputy leader, has been a massive supporter all the way through this process. We've been in daily contact with him. But we've always said this is not about signing a blank cheque. It's got to be the right deal. The original rescind motion, I think, was necessary to get parties to the table.
Has there maybe been instructions from the National Reform Party to maybe sort of question this?
No, this has squarely come from Reform Doncaster, and we reached out to HQ and said we need support on this, but we've driven this from Doncaster.
We heard there, James, using the word rescind just to get Mayor Ros Jones and the Labour executive to talk. James, that's caused all sorts of uncertainty around this. I've been told some people have pulled their job applications from the airport because this was, all up in the air, if you pardon the pun. Businesses around the airport have had to put their planning on hold. A guy who runs is a depot manager. He said, I want to expand the number of HGVs I've got. I can't at the moment because I don't even know what's happening. Now, we spoke to the deputy leader there. The leader is Craig Ward. You might remember him, James. We've spoken about him on the show before. There was an interview that went viral with one of the brilliant local reporters, Harry Harrison, a few months ago.
It is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. This is how that went down.
It's claimed by Reform that residents have faced a maximum council tax increase for the last 3 years. That's a lie, isn't it? It's not true.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a lie, Harry.
But it's not true. And I think you guys know it's not true.
It's not. Well, it is what it is. It is what it is. It's been a rise.
So he's in charge now.
Yeah, so he's the leader, and he was at the meeting yesterday for the first time since that interview, James. This was the first one in it, so that was about 2 months ago. We obviously want to speak to him. He's the leader of the Reform group in Doncaster. We were told we can't. He had other appointments as all the reporters left the council building. We actually saw what that other appointment was. He was sat in the pub beer garden opposite the council with a few of the other Reform councillors.
You'd think they'd have found a pub a bit further away from where all the journalists were gathered.
It is what it is, James.
It is what it is, Alex. It is. Oh, you're flying today.
And this wasn't even the most surprising thing, though, from the whole meeting. This is what Councillor Keir decided to raise during this meeting. Remember, this is about critical infrastructure, local area. This is what Reform Councillor Keir decided to talk about.
So, what I've got to say is not been mentioned by any member in this chamber, and it's been a topic that seems no one wants to cover. Given the verified unidentified anomaly phenomena, UAP, activity, recorded directly over in the immediate vicinity of Doncaster Sheffield Airport, and in line with NASA's recommendations for evidence-based UAP oversight focused on aviation safety, I move to make the suggestion that full council establishes a temporary Doncaster UAP Overview and Safety Committee or panel.
He's talking about UFOs.
Like aliens.
Yeah, he's talking about UFOs and why no one wants to mention UFOs and what's Doncaster Council doing about it in a meeting about the future of the airport that could bring billions to the local economy, and he sort of throws NASA into the equation. If you watch the video, there's actually a lot of surprised looks by some of the fellow Reform councillors there. I can tell you there was bewilderment from the other journalists that were reporting on this. It's politics, James, but not as we know it.
Well played. Is he new, this lad?
So Doncaster Council, they had their elections last year.
Right, so he's newish.
Newish, yeah.
And no word yet on aliens? No, I mean no official council line on UFO policy.
There's no official UFO policy council line from Doncaster as of yet, but I'm sure they'll be working hard on it.
Sensational stuff, and it is actually worth watching that clip because of the faces of some of his own colleagues. What was the subtext there, briefly, Alex? Is he under the impression that Doncaster might be a particular focus of alien activity, or is it more a sort of broader expression of solidarity with alien observance everywhere?
Well, I think there had been talk of some UAP, as he put it, sighting around his constituency just this week, and referenced some supersonic UAP from 2020 over the Bawtry area of Doncaster, which it hadn't been followed up, funnily enough, by the council. So he wanted to know more about why no more wasn't being done about it.
His colleagues in the legal department would have been rather busy last night at Guardian Towers, because the front page splash, and indeed a double page spread inside, focuses upon a trove of data leaked from Boris Johnson's private office. And what have you discovered, Henry? What's in it?
Good afternoon, James. So we've reported a number of stories, and they cover both shining more light on Johnson's time as Prime Minister. So we reveal a secret meeting he had with Peter Thiel, the billionaire who founded the data firm Palantir, which was later given a role managing NHS data. We reveal, again, while he was in Number 10, him hosting a dinner for a Conservative peer, Lord Brownlow, who financed the refurbishment of his Downing Street flat. And that dinner, it appears, took place a day after the second national lockdown came into force. And
so in breach, probably, or certainly possibly, of lockdown rules.
Definitely raises questions about that as a possibility. And then a number of stories which now look at what Johnson has got up to since he left Downing Street a little more than 3 years ago. So there were reports last March in a number of papers about a trip that Johnson took to Caracas to meet with the Venezuelan president there, and he denied being paid for that meeting. He told a ethics watchdog he was not paid for that meeting. We've seen information that suggests he was paid more than 240,000. He was paid £240,000 after meeting with Maduro, contrary to what he said. And then we also have reported a story concerning lobbying he made, lobbying approaches he made, and indeed successfully with talking with a senior Saudi official he had met while in office, and he was asking the Saudi official if he would share a pitch with Mohammed bin Salman for a firm that Johnson co-chairs.
So there's a lot there, some of it quite dry, some of it less so. Who sort of, I mean, you mentioned an ethics watchdog. We had a rather helpful reminder last week of the importance of the independent advisor to the Prime Minister on ethics, a role that Boris Johnson essentially dispensed with after two previous incumbents resigned in disgust at his conduct. Does anybody adjudicate on matters like this?
So for the period of 2 years after Johnson left Downing Street, he was supposed to approach something called the Advisory Committee on Business Appointments, a fairly dry-sounding Whitehall watchdog, which was chaired at the time by Conservative peer Eric Pickles. And this committee gives advice to former ministers, from Prime Minister down to junior ministers, on taking up roles after they've left government and saying, you must not lobby the British government on behalf of this company, and you also are not allowed to use the contacts that you've developed while in government on behalf of that company. And so some of the stories we reported appear that he has used contacts he's developed while in government. So the meeting with the Venezuelan President Maduro in Caracas that he was later paid £240,000 for after, he was paid that from a hedge fund manager who also attended the meeting. Now, Johnson told this ethics watchdog when he put in an application to work with them, with the hedge fund, that he'd had no meetings with the hedge fund manager at all. But we found that he'd actually entertained him at Chequers just over a week before he left office.
I mean, I think they could have bumped into each other and the money fell into his pocket, Henry.
Johnson has publicly denied being paid for the meeting, and the information we have suggests that he was paid weeks after the meeting.
So, as I think you realise, the question about adjudication is interesting to me, because I'm pretty sure that even when he took the job on the Daily Mail before he'd shaken the dust from the bottom of his loafers after having to leave Downing Street, he was in breach of what former Prime Ministers should and shouldn't be doing. So his view, were he ever somehow rendered unable to lie, his view would be that he no one could touch him anyway, so I'll do what I jolly well please, thank you very much.
Well, with the Daily Mail, Johnson approached, this was published, when it became clear that he was working for the Daily Mail, it became clear that Johnson had approached the advisory committee, this ethics watchdog, only 30 minutes before the job was announced, which was not seen as sufficient time to consider whether or not what restrictions should be placed on that role. And he was then found to be in breach of the rules, as he had been previously when he signed for the Daily Telegraph after he resigned as Foreign Secretary some years before.
Is there more to come?
There's a large trove of data.
Thank you. Very diplomatic answer. And while I have you, why did you call it the Boris Files? Why didn't you call it the Johnson Files? You're giving it that kind of buffoonish persona, another little run around the block, instead of going in hard on the surname. But I'll leave you with that thought, Henry, if I may. I don't know how much attention you were paying to this programme back in November, when it wasn't the most listened to speech radio programme in the history of commercial radio, but it is now. Have I mentioned that at all? But we stumbled into a story that was almost unbelievable. It was a story of a pornographic novel written by a Reform UK candidate. And as a joke, and also partly because he's doing so well these days, he sometimes needs taking down a peg or two, I set Henry Riley the impossible task of turning it into a series. And inevitably, Henry being Henry, he rose to the challenge, and we had a short... Well, Henry, you take up the tale. It began in November.
Let me remind listeners who were listening back then, this was regarding Councillor Rob Ford, who was a Reform councillor on Kent County Council. He then defected to the Independent Reformists on Kent.
Yes.
Since we spoke about him last, he's actually defected to another party called Restore Britain, which is set up by a former Reform
Is that the People's Front
MP.
of Britain, or the Britain People's Front?
This is Rupert Lowe, who was a Reform MP. Let me just remind you what happened. This was Councillor Rob Ford speaking back in November.
I'm currently taking legal advice regarding defamation of my character by KCC, by Reform UK and KCC, that occurred on October the 13th. I intend in the coming months to pursue this with vigour. A few days ago, I discovered so-called complaints against me, all relating to my novel writing. It's astonishing that my name can be defamed simply because I wrote an erotic novel and got it published by a major company. And I then mentioned it to a few people in the building behind me. It's a shame that our great nation has come to this. Thank you.
Has Rob Ford...
Do we know how the legal case is going?
I haven't had an update on
Okay.
that. I've got actually the bad boy here.
I know you love
Diaries
it. It's been
of
on
a
your desk for months.
Colourful life.
Just it's got post-it notes coming out. Coming out of its ears.
Just to remind you one passage:
Yes,
yelping and bashing the bed sheets. She wraps sheets around her wrist anyway, so you sort of get.
Does it fall open at that bit, Henry?
It does. Yeah. No, there's one on every page. Then we had an instalment with Nadine Dorries, who's written a number of books, of course, best-selling.
Did we give it a name? The feature.
I think it was Riley's Reform erotic novel of the month at one point.
We found another one.
We found another one. There was Nadine Dorries. Now we've got one today. And this is the individual who's standing, Rob Kenyon, in the Makerfield by-election.
Really?
And he has written a book. Sorry, there's so many sheets. It's got, well, the average review on Amazon is 3.3 out of 5.
That's not bad.
It's very good.
It's definitely him. It's not two people with the same name.
No, definitely him.
Because I've got a listener called Rob Kenyon, who is not
really?
Rob Kenyon, and he's having quite an interesting time of it at the moment.
No, definitely him.
Yeah.
He's. I mean, one review says very easy to read, would definitely make a great film. Buy it, so you won't be disappointed. Best book you'll read this year. So I mean, good reviews on various sort of places. That was Amazon. So he's written now a racy World War II novel, The Wigan Plumber. It's a 309-page book called The Blood Waltz. It was published on the 10th of July 2017. It's described as an epic journey of one man's attempts to readjust an alternative future while wrestling with his moral compass, lust and ego, and all the while practicing the art of self-preservation. It follows the story of a World War II soldier who goes back to northern France back in time, he discovers...
in a time travel?
I think, yes.
Right.
And I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing, I'll be honest.
Whose side was he on?
He's on the Allied front.
Right.
He discovers although he discovers the advice of a dormant Nazi bunker, he then ends up falling in love with a high-ranking Gestapo investigator's wife and teams up with a secret agent. Anyway, you sort of get the digress. Let me tell you.
Look, just give the people what they want.
Yeah.
Is it dirty?
There's some interesting bits. Some I can't. I've put some in front of you, James. There's some the sort of top of the pile. I don't think you'll be able to read. But this. Let me read you one particular bit. This is from Rob Kenyon.
Yeah.
"One vodka martini, please," said Clyde as he watched in amusement at the squirming Rater as he struggles to keep his eyes from Anna's breasts. Anna is the Gestapo, the wife of. As she pulls her shoulders back and slides her fur coat off the back of her shoulders, rocking from side to side in the process. "Thank you," said Clyde as the waiter walks away. They both sit down. The open bosom of Anna's dress catches Clyde's eye. She notices him. She notices, causing him to look away and then back to her face. And actually, the waiter comes back with a thanks, Keith. The waiter comes back with a vodka martini, and the sort of same repeats itself.
Do we know why this is such a commonplace pastime for a certain type of politics?
I don't know. And actually, if you read the Mirror review, it's. I mean, they say it's not just about sex and romance. There's a tension.
It's got Nazis in it.
Different sorts of way. It does feature. There's a letter from Adolf Hitler in there.
Excellent.
I very much enjoyed this book. I'd urge as many people as possible to buy it and encourage Mr. Kenyon to stop messing around with sort of current professions. Forget Westminster, pick up the pen because it's very good. One more. I say one more. There's quite a few. Let's go to page 103. 309 pages in total. Anna shakes her head, knowing that the last time they went out, they ended up sleeping together and she was married. She'd felt rotten inside every time Captain Jaeger had looked at her in the eye for the following few weeks after it and didn't want to go through it again, even if she did have a soft spot for Clyde, and was struggling to hide that fact. "I'm sorry, I can't." Anna turns to walk away, but looks out the corner of her eye, secretly wanting Clyde to chase after her and convince her to go. She was playing hard to get. That's another passage.
But he's been very rude about English women, but he seems strangely dewy-eyed about Nazi brides.
Another one here. The waiter serves Clyde his a lot of drinks. Waiter serves Clyde his drink, and then picks up 3 wine bottles and an empty bottle of brandy, and then walks away. Clyde looks at Anna, who starts giggling. Anna leads forward and smiles at him whilst playing with her hair. Clyde looks at Anna, and his expression changes to a more serious one. He leans into Anna, and they kiss. Clyde holds Anna's face with both hands as she rubs her hand up the back of his head, ruffling his hair as she does.
He's clearly a Streets fan. You know that track by the Streets?
I do, but what's that?
I was watching a programme on ITV the other night. She's well into you if she's playing with her hair or something like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, do you remember that?
No, it's vaguely.
Okay.
More Genesis, man.
Even though we've been doing Riley's Randy Reform Roundup.
Close.
Yeah. You probably still have to go through the motions.
I do. And I'll tell you exactly who's standing. The only other thing I did want to add, James, is I need to say what Reform say. And they said, we're delighted with the Mirror's fulsome endorsement of Rob's book. With their support,
don't know what fulsome means, do they? But anyway, carry on.
With their supports, we hope to see queues outside bookshops in Wigan very soon.
Marvellous.
I'm not advertising it, but I did buy it from Amazon for 99p. Good news if you've got Kindle Unlimited.
Kids need shoes. Any apology for Carol Vorderman yet? Are we aware of? Hang on, I've got the answer. Asked directly if he would like to take the opportunity to apologise. Mr. Kenyon says, I think I've addressed the issue. No, you haven't. Anyway.
£6.99 in paperback. And the candidates, Jake Austin for the Liberal Democrats, Count Binface for the Count Binface Party, Andy Burnham for the Labour and Cooperative Party, Dan Clark for the Libertarian Party, John Alfred Dyer, who's an independent, Ed Gemmell from the Climate Party, Paul Gould, an independent, Howling Lord Hope from the official Monster Raving Loony Party, Rob Kenyon from Reform UK, Robert Pownall, an independent, Rebecca Shepherd from Restore Britain, Sarah Wakefield from the Green Party, Peter Ward from Rejoin EU, Bring In PR, Michael Winstanley from the Conservative Party.
Flipping out. And I suppose, I forget exactly what the rules are, but if any of them have written erotic novels or sort of Nazi novels, then we probably have to cover that as well next week, will we?
It's a good point. I will actually inquire with all the candidates, see if they have.
Do you think we get another one?
Well, that's 3, and there's been...
was there not a fourth? Was it just...
Well, there was a semi one, because I
steady.
thought David Bull, who's the former chairman, who is no longer the chairman, I thought he had written one, but it turns out it was more a sort of sex, self-help, sort of educational book. So I did buy it. It didn't really fit in. There are a lot of new Reform councillors, James, so I'll
There could be a lot of books.
finding out. And
Not
if anyone...
just a genre, an entire shelf, an entire section of Waterstone soon could be dedicated to Riley's Randy Reform Roundup.
It's not quite. If people do have tips...
That's what I'm calling it now.
James. Riley's...
Riley's Randy Reform Roundup.
Thank you.
No?
No, I like it. I like it, yeah.
I mean, I can't really believe there'll be another one, but I think I said that last time.
You did, and the first time.
And the first time. Obviously, as ever, Henry Riley's inbox is open, which is not a figure of speech. What interests me is what Labour have done to get to this point. And what they have done is try to appeal to the historic Labour voter, already wobbly, because we saw in 2016 and 2019 that they were not immune to voting against their own interests. The historic Labour voter who was being tempted towards reform. And the calculation was, I think correctly, although this is something else that's changing at the moment, the calculation was that they wanted the government to be much tougher on immigration. Here is a question I've never asked you before. What's the difference between immigration and immigrants? What's the difference between being tough on immigration and being tough on immigrants? Because I think it's really hard to answer that question, and Labour have failed because they have responded to a belief that they need to appeal to this constituency of voters by being tougher on immigration, and they have been. They've also allowed it in some of their rhetoric and some of their policies to elide into being horrible to immigrants, either potential or actual. And the calculation was that by becoming a party that presented itself as being anti-immigration, okay, and they might dispute that and claim that we're in favour of this type but not that type, but the general perception and the general intention was that they would portray themselves as being anti-immigration, and that would persuade traditional, historic or potential voters, swallowing the snake oil that Farage has been serving up for his entire life, that would persuade them back into the fold. It was a policy, if you like, of appeasement. And the reason why I asked you a year ago who it was aimed at was because I wasn't sure how that was going to work. Who are these people that are not engaging in tribal or xenophobic or atavistic prejudice, who are not being encouraged to hate everybody brown, but have a very specific idea of exactly which beneficiaries of our immigration policy they have a problem with and which ones they're supremely comfortable with. But Keir Starmer has decided, and when he appointed Shabana Mahmood as Home Secretary, he doubled down on this, that the best thing to do was to become an anti-immigration party. And on one level, it has worked. The numbers are falling at a rate of knots that I don't think we've ever seen before. From a high start. But how many times did you hear Farage mention immigration today? Have you noticed that yet? How many times did you hear Farage mention immigration today? What's going on there, do you think? Well, I've told you previously is that he is going to have to acknowledge at some point that particular dead horse has been flogged beyond any useful purpose. So if you are currently on welfare, particularly a sickness or a disability benefit, be afraid. Be very afraid. If you're between jobs, be afraid. Be very afraid. You are the new immigrant. You are the new small boat passenger. Just this isn't opinion, this isn't counting, but just mark my words. Just watch. If you haven't already felt the heat of that hatred, you're about to. People with blue badges being abused in supermarket car parks, disabled people, having people bang on their door to say, I've seen you walking. It's coming, okay? It always follows. You unleash hatred, you kind of have to find a new target when the old one disappears. So Labour became an anti-immigration party, and they delivered huge drops in immigration. But the politician who is defined by his hatred of immigrants is having an absolute cakewalk. He's having what's the opposite of a nightmare? He's having a dream. The man who is defined by his hatred of immigration is being carried shoulder high through the streets of Havering. So it's failed completely. Labour have delivered what anti-immigration voters want, and they continue to deliver it, and anti-immigration voters have not responded at all. And then the second bit of this, which is harder to count at the moment, but the opinion polls certainly give us an indication and an insight. The Greens are hoovering up the kind of people who are also traditional Labour voters, albeit possibly from a different socio-economic class or educational background. The Greens are hoovering up voters who are repulsed by Labour becoming an anti-immigrant, not anti-immigration, but an anti-immigrant party. So, Nigel Farage is nothing if not xenophobic, racist, whatever word you prefer. The days of pretending that people will be repelled by him when they fully understand that are over. People are not repelled by it. They are lapping it up. It's a tragedy, but it's a tragedy that has been incubated and delivered by the media in this country, in large part, and by the ancient appeal of hatreds of every kind. Because remember, he's certainly not off the hook for anti-Semitism, albeit that he's currently pretending to be a champion of the Jewish people. His Islamophobia is visible from space. His party's full of people that don't even like seeing black faces on television. And the racism is endemic, it's absolutely crystal clear, and it's popular. I hope that doesn't come as a heartbreaking shock to you. I speak with white privilege, but it's popular. The racism is popular. The respectable face of racism is the pretense that I have legitimate concerns about immigration, and Keir Starmer decided to hoover up those votes. He's completely failed. He hasn't hoovered up one of them. And yet, anti-immigrant rhetoric has risen just as immigration figures have plummeted. And all of the people in the middle, all of the people who are traditional Labour voters and repulsed by racism, they're now increasingly disillusioned with or even repulsed by Keir Starmer's Labour government. So they're the ones that are moving to the Greens. So Labour have bet the house on holding on to their core vote from, if you like, the educated voter. And this isn't snobbery or condescension. This is psephology. This is measured. You know, you look at the areas where education is high, and you look at support for Brexit or support for immigration, and you look at the areas where education is low, and you look at those things, and you get very different messages. So Labour have bet the house on retaining their core support among the educated professional while gaining the support or retaining the support of the less educated worker by becoming anti-immigration and anti-immigrant, and they have delivered that and somehow achieved neither of the goals that they set themselves. They have not hung on to the core voter, although they're doing a little bit better in cities than some of the worst predictions expected. They have not successfully held on to the core voter who is repulsed by racism, and they have not managed to seduce any of the voters who may or may not be racist, but are certainly animated by all of the pictures they see and the posts that they read and the politicians that they listen to, insisting that all of their problems have been caused by Johnny Foreigner come lately. Why? Why has this Labour calculation failed so completely? 0345 60 60 973. That's what I want you to tell me. Why has it... I mean, you can challenge the analysis if you want, but you better have got up early, because I can't currently see any flaws in it at all. They thought they'd hold on to this voter, and they thought they'd be able to hoover up this voter by appeasing the anti-immigrant or the racist rhetoric that has dominated our discourse now for the best part of 10 years. And it has failed miserably, despite measurably and visibly ramping up the rhetoric and reducing the numbers. I said to you a year ago, I think they could bring it down to zero, and it wouldn't move the needle. It wouldn't change anything. I don't think I had foreseen a year ago Farage pivoting towards attacking the disabled, or attacking the sick, or attacking the people who are between jobs, and pretending that everybody on any benefit is some sort of con artist. But it was bound to happen. It'd be single mothers next if we hadn't changed so much as a society. So why? What is it that has... what explains Labour's utter failure to achieve either of the things that they wanted to achieve? Why do the people most animated by immigration not respond positively to the huge drops in immigration? And why have the people, if you like, more clear-eyed about immigration, started departing the party in their droves? Why has this particular tactic failed so miserably? No civilian in this country, or possibly the world, has done more to pursue a programme of sanctions against Vladimir Putin's regime, and his name is Sir Bill Browder, the anti-corruption campaigner and head of the global Magnitsky Justice Campaign, and also, as you probably know, a good friend of mine. So we turn to him, because he will be across this like few others. And we begin by asking what your immediate reaction to this news was, Bill.
The same as Kiev's reaction, which is very negative. I mean, here you've got a situation which is, how does Putin afford to continue to fight this war after 4 years? And the answer is because of oil and oil products and all the money that comes from that. That's where he gets the money. And so the logic has been since the very beginning, how do we stop him from this invasion? We take away his money. How do we take away his money? By stopping his sale of oil. And so for the UK, who in theory is one of the biggest allies of Ukraine, to basically say to the Russians, oh, it's okay, you can sell your oil now, is the biggest stupidity. You can, it's unimaginable how stupid this is. We spend all this money helping Ukraine fight off the Russians, and now we're giving money to Putin to continue to kill Ukrainians. It just makes no sense. And I have to wonder what is behind this, who made this decision, where the pressure came from, because it just doesn't make sense on the surface.
Let me be the devil's advocate, if I may. My understanding is that the new legislation, which does affect a ramping up of broader sanctions, an expansion of the sanctions programme, kicked in on Tuesday, but because of concerns caused by the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and the ongoing war in Iran, they've just put a 3-month pause on the jet fuel and refined diesel element of it, as well as the LNG. So they've sort of said, turn the tap off slowly, don't cut the pipe tonight.
Well, but let's just look at this. And so at the moment, Russia produces oil, they produce jet fuel, or they sell oil to people who make jet fuel. And so then the question is, what happens to that stuff? And when it's under sanctions, it means that Russia just gets a lower price. It's not as if they don't sell their stuff. So what happens when you lift sanctions, it's not as if the supply all of a sudden comes about that you wouldn't have otherwise. It just means that Russia gets more money and other people get less money. It's just a redistribution of the profit in this chain of oil sales. And so the idea that somehow this is going to lead to getting rid of jet fuel shortages is just nonsense. It just means that Russia gets more money. And I'll tell you something else which is interesting, which is that Vladimir Zelensky is watching all this stuff, and he's getting pretty frustrated because we're all talking about sanctions and then not really doing it, or doing it halfway, or lifting sanctions. And so you know what he's doing about this whole oil business? He's sending his drones into Russia and blowing up their oil refineries. And so he's imposing his own sanctions because, we are so fickle and half-hearted about doing our sanctions. And that is having an effect. And Vladimir Putin is now hiding in his bunker and begging for the Ukrainians not to bomb his parades and so on and so forth.
I mean, the licenses last for 3 months. We could be sitting here in 3 months' time feeling a little bit more sanguine and philosophical about things.
Well, the U.S. were the first people to do this whole sanctions removal. This is what happened at the beginning of the Iran war. Scott Bessent, the U.S. Treasury Secretary, quote, temporarily lifted sanctions for 1 month. 1 month went by, and then he temporarily lifted sanctions for a second month. That second month went by, and he just lifted sanctions for a third month. And so when you open up this Pandora's box, this is what you end up. And I just have to think that this 3-month thing is going to turn into 6 months, and every month Putin gets more money.
Well, we will join you in keeping a very close eye on that particular issue. I wonder whether you've been on the phone at all in the last 24 hours. You're a knight of the realm now, Sir Bill. You are a man of influence. Have you brought your expertise and unhappiness to bear upon the people making these decisions?
Well, I have, but it makes more of a difference for me coming on your show to express my displeasure than it does with a private phone call.
well, to that point then, for people listening, I wouldn't force them through the mangle of this particular question, but if they were given a choice between buying refined jet fuel from India that has been refined from oil that came out of Russia, or cancelling their summer holiday, some people may be a little bit torn on that. Is that an oversimplistic analysis?
It wouldn't happen. It's not as if there's no jet fuel. It's just a question of who gets the money for that jet fuel. It's not like all of a sudden by lifting the sanctions, you can go on your summer holiday. By lifting the sanctions, it just means that Russia can do more bombing and gets more money from it. And in fact, if the Indians are the ones who are being penalized because the Russian oil then comes in at a higher price. It's not as if there's no oil or jet fuel available for summer holidays because of this move.
So just to clarify finally then, I mean, you are obviously, for clear reasons, in favour of an immediate cessation of this this commerce, this business, but it's not. They're bringing in a ban. They're just pausing it for 3 months. It's not as if there was a ban in place previously that is now being lifted. It's an easing of sanctions that were incoming, not an easing of sanctions that were in place.
However you want to describe it, we should be cutting off Russia's access to money in the world, because if we don't, then we end up in a situation where we're going to have to continue paying for Ukrainians. More people will die. And by the way, the Russians are not just going after Ukraine. They're busy buzzing. There was an incident yesterday where an RAF jet nearly crashed into a Russian military jet over the Black Sea. I mean, this is a day-by-day, what I would call almost open war with Russia. They are the enemy. They are the adversary. And to do anything that's not completely harsh to the Russians is basically leaving ourselves wide open to God knows what in the future.
Indeed, and I think Lithuanian politicians were evacuated yesterday to an underground shelter after a drone violated their country's airspace. While I have you, Bill, what's the bigger picture sanctions-wise? Are we seeing meaningful intervention from Western countries? I suppose the EU most obviously, the United States unlikely to lead the way under the current regime. Are sanctions having any effect at all on Vladimir Putin's war machine?
Well, I think the sanctions generally are having a big effect on his war machine. I mean, he's suffering. He's been suffering. But the one big place where he continues to get his money from is oil. And I was working on a big project for about the last year, trying to get sanctions imposed on the 8 oil refineries which buy 80% of Russia's oil. Because if I had succeeded in that, then we would have been in a situation where Russia would have effectively gotten about 75% less money that they would normally get, and then they would probably be out of business and unable to conduct the war. My work was going very well until the moment that the U.S., Israel, Iran war started. And at that moment, oil became a scarce commodity, and any thoughts about limiting anything about the oil was thrown out the window. I mean, I think that Putin is suffering for sure. You can see it in all different ways. Probably the most interesting thing that's happening right now is that he's so paranoid that he's turned off the internet in Moscow and St. Petersburg. And most people in Russia didn't care about the war. They were all like, it's not our problem as long as we live comfortably and fine. And all of a sudden, when they're not with that, when they don't have their internet, they're all squeaking and screaming as if the world is coming to an end. And so finally, Putin is seeing what it feels like for normal Russians to be upset. Now, they're not upset about Ukrainians being killed every day, civilians being killed. They're only upset about not having internet, but at least the war is coming home to them.
Bill Browder, always a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. So Bill, as I told you, is an anti-corruption campaigner and head of the Global Magnitsky Justice Campaign. So it is clearer now that this is not quite what Kemi Badenoch claimed in Parliament yesterday. It is a postponement of an introduction, but as Bill just made crystal clear, in his view, it shouldn't have been postponed at all, and certainly any money raised could be and would be used by Vladimir Putin to fund his war in Ukraine. And B, crucially, this 3-month hiatus is something you need to keep a very, very close eye on, because if it doesn't expire immediately after 3 months, then the situation gets worse and worse and worse.
I've heard what the family have said. They're absolutely right. I mean, the fact that such a horrific incident where they will be grieving beyond measure, probably for the rest of their lives, should be turned into a political moment, has been the worst thing I've heard last night and today. I couldn't bring myself to come on initially, and then I I was sent by your producer, Nigel Farage's emergency address, and I thought, that cannot be allowed to stand. I'm surprised no current serving chief constable has come on to address that kind of language, because it is inflammatory, it is extremist, it is divisive, it's everything the family didn't want. I'm sure the family are reacting to it as well. This is not the time for that kind of language. And as you've quite rightly said, the officers who were involved in this made what everyone can see on the body-worn camera, and with hindsight, a catastrophic error of judgment. What will have happened to them in the first 24 hours is their professional standards unit will have informed the Independent Office of Police Complaints. They will have been reported and they will be being held to account. That will have been paused for the murder investigation and the trial to take place, and will now be going ahead. So they will be held to account for the mistakes they've made in responding to this. And those mistakes will live with the family forever as well. It's a terrible thing, but it doesn't justify the commentary that we've heard from every politician, Nigel Farage, Chris Philp. I've heard others talking about it. Nick Thomas-Symonds, probably the only balanced view I've heard from a politician in the last 24 hours. Let's have the inquiry. Let's hold the officers to account. They will be expecting that. They know that's happening. Hampshire released the video. But we know who's responsible for this. And the murderer, the monster that he is serving the time that he absolutely deserves. And his own family have said, and let's not make this, in the way we're making the actions of these police officers somehow the actions of policing as a profession. We shouldn't be making the actions of one Sikh boy the actions of the Sikh community. And language that has been used by people like Farage, yet again, he did this up following Southport. He's doing it again. He's doing it for political points. It's extreme language. It's really not going to help.
And is it? I mean,
situation in this society today.
I mean, I follow these things quite closely, as you do, and even I've been somewhat taken aback by the new grift that being white somehow makes you less likely to receive full and fair policing. That this phrase two-tier policing, which is simultaneously meaningless and hideous, is gaining traction, which of course partly explains why people start lobbing bricks at police officers when they turn up for the latest round of the Farage riots.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really care whether you're right or left or centrist or liberal. I mean, undermining policing, the criminal justice system in this way is a ridiculous thing for a politician who wants to govern the country, all of the country, presumably, not just the people he likes. It's a ridiculous thing to do. And he's returning to an old trope that they've used before in terms of two-tier policing. I mean, policing gets things wrong every day, but it also gets things right every day. And as Nick Thomas-Symonds said this morning, you know, many thousands of them marching towards danger on our behalf every day, doing the best that they can, putting themselves on the line, do not need to be traduced by comments like two-tier policing. And of course, it's just factually incorrect. I was a detective for most of my career. There's absolutely no evidence of two-tier policing. You know, if you were a black person or a brown person or any ethnic minority in the country today, you'd be quite surprised to hear that you are currently being favoured by the criminal justice system, including law enforcement, over white people. The police force is 90% white, 75% male. It is very unlikely that in the 3 years I've been retired, policing for the first time in its 200 years has become anti-white. I mean,
yes,
just saying that out loud sounds ridiculous.
Well, except until it doesn't, I suppose, and say it loud enough and say it disingenuously enough, and some people will come along with it. Can I ask? I mean, you may not be able to ask these questions, but do things like who made the 999 call matter? If the brother of the murderer made the call claiming that his brother was the victim, would that influence how the police responded in the first instance?
Yeah, I mean, when I talk about catastrophic errors of judgment, any police officer going to any call has to get as much information or intelligence as they possibly can before they arrive at the call, for their own safety and for their own understanding and to prepare themselves for what they face. What you shouldn't let that do is cloud your judgment and give you one fixed understanding of the situation you're about to face. That does seem to be, and we can see it on the body-worn camera, and fair play to Hampshire Police for releasing that. There was a time when policing just simply would not do that and would not be that transparent. Well, we can see it. questions have got to be asked about professional curiosity, about your ability to investigate, for your ability to take both sides of a story and make dynamic decisions as it unfolds in front of you. They clearly made a catastrophic error of judgment.
Would you expect the head of the Met to say something about this? I mean, it's possible that there's an interpretation of pure cold rage that doesn't involve civil disobedience or abuse of police officers or pogroms like the ones that we saw last time Farage responded to a crime committed by somebody with dark skin. Would you expect the head of the Met, the commissioner, to comment on this? Because it may work to his favour. It adds to his ludicrous narrative of victimhood.
I wouldn't expect the head of the Met to be commenting on a Hampshire police investigation.
But no, on Farage's words, more so than on the Hampshire activities.
No, the thing with being a senior police officer, as I well know from my time as a senior police officer, is taking on politicians in public, as Sir Mark Rowley found out with Zach Polanski, is a DEFCON 1 moment. You know, police officers should not be politicised in the way that Nigel Farage comments are politicising policing. Police officers themselves shouldn't go out and talk about politicians' comments in public. Politicians should be held to account by the public who elect them, preferably at the ballot box. But police officers could describe exactly what's happening in this case and say that, and basically, support the family's view. The family's view is this is not a moment for politics. This is a moment for an investigation and an inquiry to hold poor policing to account. We've seen that many times before. I think we're getting better at that. I think policing is getting more transparent. I think policing is getting better at apologising, and it's getting better at putting itself forward to be held to account by the public it serves. And long may that be the case, and long may that continue. I don't think it helps for senior police officers to come out and take out politicians. I think, unfortunately, that's why they're relying on retired police officers like me to do that. And as I said, this is the single and only interview I'm doing on this. But this is just to say my thoughts are entirely with the family. I've dealt with a lot of grieving victims' families, survivors. I know that it is almost impossible to say anything that will help that family at this time. But, it is possible to make their life worse. And some of these politicians, I think, are doing precisely that.
Good Lord. We're grateful for your time. And this is my final question, because prompted actually by your reflections on how much policing has changed in the years since you joined the force, and how things like the service itself releasing the body cam footage would once have been unthinkable. Would you be confident that the IOPC investigation gets to the absolute bottom of this?
Unfortunately, I think the IOPC, like policing itself, has got a long way to go to win back trust and confidence in its competence and its professionalism. But this is, probably the latest and most high-profile case it will have for a very long time. I would hope that the commissioners in charge of it are putting all of the resources into it that they possibly can, because what it must be more than anything is totally professional, totally diligent, and totally swift.